Welcome back everyone to more NASCAR Heat 4 at Knee Pit Gaming. Today's setup video takes us to Iowa Speedway, and I knew I wanted to get to Iowa pretty quickly after release simply because the any car and any track combo in NASCAR Heat 4 means that we can run the Cup cars at Iowa. So we'll be doing just that today. We'll be talking Cup cars, we'll be talking Xfinity, and we'll be talking trucks. We'll talk a little bit about lap times and of course a lot about long run speed. So let's get started. One of the big changes for the physics in NASCAR Heat 4 is the addition of tire wear. Now tire wear is going to have a huge effect on the setup that you're running, so it makes sense that we need to, before we get into setup discussion, talk a little bit about the options that I use while I'm testing for these setups. So we'll start off in the options menu under the gameplay tab, and then we're going to scroll down to tire wear and fuel consumption. Normally I do this on 2x. I don't like to go any higher because I do like long green flag runs, but I understand that some of you like to go all the way up to 4x. Player tire wear rate, I like more wear. I like maximum tire wear, so I generally test on more wear and less grip under the grip fall off. So keep that in mind. If you're playing with different settings such as less wear and more grip, then that's going to change the setup that you're going to want to use in the races. So keep that in mind as we're talking about setups. What I'll try to do in each video is let you know the particular settings, because I don't go for maximum tire wear at every track, just where I feel that it is appropriate. And also keep in mind on the driving tab, there is a setting that you'll need to match up for the AI. So if you want maximum tire wear, then you need to have that on both the player car and the AI car. Or if you're going for less tire wear and more grip, then change that for the AI as well. Before we jump into the setups themselves, let's talk a little bit about lap times and the track itself and the overall plan that I had for this track. So lap times, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the best guide I can probably give you is to look in the top left-hand corner and see that goal time. In this case, for the Cup cars, it's 22:65. The closer you can get to that, the better short run or qualifying type speed you're going to have. But I very quickly realized when I tried to transition over to race setup that I had to undo a lot of the stuff that gave me speed and comfort in the car in order to save the right rear tire for the long run. So what we're going to be looking at today is actually all about the long run. These setups are not about speed. You can make the car go so much faster than this, but it's all about making sure you have something left at the very end of the run, particularly for those of you who like to play on the more aggressive tire wear and fall off settings. Getting started in the Cup car, you can see that the shock settings are basic. 3.5 settings worked really well. I tried some other combinations, but as much as possible, I like to keep things fairly standard for you guys and then let you tune and adjust on your own. But if you want to get a stiffer, more aggressive shock package, then it won't be quite as nice over the bumps, but it has a really good feel to the car and the car has much quicker reactions. So keep that in mind as you're making adjustments. Weight settings, 51% front weight, 53% wedge. The higher that you make both of these numbers, the tighter and more stable the car is going to be. So if you're looking for ways over a long run to save the rear tires in your setup, this is one way to do it. Increase the front weight and or the wedge, and it will help tighten the car overall and save those rear tires. Moving on to the spring settings, 600 pounds in the left front, 1,200 pounds in the right front. I wanted a big split here to sort of tighten the car up, particularly on the entry of the corner, and once again save those rear tires. This track is very easy to eat up that right rear tire quickly, so I have to try to do some things, as I mentioned earlier in the video, to take speed out of the car, but also to add long run stability to the car. The rear springs, 350 in the left rear, 380 in the right rear. A couple of things you can do here if you're looking to save the rear tires. So make the wear on those last longer. You can either reduce both of the rear springs together, so by 50, 75 pounds or more on both of those, or you can adjust the split between the left rear and the right rear. The more splits you have, meaning the higher the right rear is over the left rear, the looser the car is generally going to be from the center of the corner off. So keep that in mind. Tire settings, pretty standard here. There's a lot of adjustability there. 11 pounds, which is pretty close to the minimum. I believe the minimum is actually 10 pounds, which also works quite nicely. 29 and 28 on the right sides. But again, you've got a lot of adjustability. The lower you make the air pressure overall, the more grip you'll tend to have and the more stability you'll tend to have in the car. And the more you increase the air pressures, the less grip, and it introduces a different feel to the car. Moving on to the miscellaneous settings, +3 and -3 in the camber, which seems to work out perfectly fine for me. You can run more camber than that. It certainly isn't an issue, but +3 and -3 work out well for me. Front sway bar is at 1.315, and again, as I've used in previous videos, this seems to work out really well. You can go higher than this, up around 1.5, 1.6, and so on, or you can go down lower than this. The front sway bar will control how quickly the car turns into the corner and how tight it is overall. The bigger front bar you use, the tighter overall the car is going to be. The smaller front bar you use, the looser the car is going to be overall. So it makes for a very simple adjustment if you need to loosen or tighten the car. Just be aware that if you get too low on the front sway bar, then you can really make the car unstable, particularly on entry. The track bar, 9.5 inches on both the left and the right side. You may want to actually lower this number some if you're having trouble with the right rear wearing out before the right front, because the lower you make the track bar, the tighter the car is going to be. The more you raise the track bar, the looser the car is going to be, which of course looser means wearing the rear tires more. Brake bias, anywhere from I actually prefer a brake bias just a little bit less than the 70% here, but I made it a little bit higher on this setup in order to try to stabilize the car and even tighten it a little bit on corner entry. That's particularly useful later in the run when the car starts to really free up as the rear tires start to wear. So a little bit higher number here than I would traditionally use, but I have used down around 60 or even lower to help the car turn on entry. Grill tape, 50%, and I haven't gotten any warnings even after running full races with this. So 50% grill tape should not be too aggressive. In fact, you might be able to get even more aggressive if you so choose. Wheel lock is at 10 degrees. Steering offset is at 0.05, both pretty standard for me. The one warning I would give you on the steering offset is make sure not to get this number too high, because if you get this number too high, it can actually introduce a turn to the right on the straightaway, which is very disconcerting since everything you're doing at this track is focusing on getting the car to turn left. So be careful getting the steering offset too high. Other than that, you've got some adjustability there. Gear settings, another area where you've got quite a bit of adjustability. Looking particularly at the rear end ratio, 389 works really well for me, but you can get even more aggressive and go up to about a 411 gear and turn even more RPMs. This can be useful over a long run as your RPMs are going to drop because your lap times are getting worse. So it's a balance on whether you want to go for optimum short run speed or longer run speed, but there again a lot of adjustability there, and you can use numbers in the 370s and so on as well if you're really trying to lower the RPM and save those tires. So a lot of adjustability there, and overall a pretty tight setup for me, but again it saves the tires over the long run. That will do it for the Cup cars. Now let's move on to Xfinity. We're not going to spend a great deal of time in either Xfinity or the trucks because the setups are very similar to Cup, but I did want to show you a couple of variations on what we've already seen with the Cup cars. First thing I want to show you guys is the weight settings. The front weight is a little bit higher here in the Xfinity car. Again, just a different way of doing things and a little bit different feel. Remember, the higher the front weight percentage, the tighter overall the car is going to be. And remember what I talked about in trying to save those rear tires. Wedge is the same at 53%. Under spring settings, you notice that the rear springs are a little bit softer, only 30 pounds of rear spring split. That helps to save that right rear tire over the long run. Okay, then moving over to the miscellaneous settings, the track bar, 12 inches on the left, 11 inches on the right, higher than what you saw in the Cup cars. That's to help the car turn. The little higher number on the left side is to help the car turn, particularly on entry to the corner. Really works out well for me. As always though, if you're getting too loose, then drop the track bar on both sides, and that will certainly help it out. You also notice the brake bias a little bit lower at 65% here, just to help that car rotate a little bit better on corner entry and through the center. And then finally, the gear settings, you notice that there is a 411 gear as the rear end ratio as opposed to the 389 we were looking at before. Xfinity, a little bit slower than the Cup cars, and this helps to turn a few more RPMs. So that'll do it for Xfinity. Let's finally move over to the trucks. Only a couple of things that I wanted to point out to you in the trucks. One of those is under the weight settings, which is the front weight and wedge. You notice some higher numbers here than what we've seen before. Again, just a little bit different way of doing it, and it provides a different feel to the truck overall as opposed to some of the lower percentages that we've seen earlier. In the spring settings, the rear springs a little bit higher than what we've just been looking at in Xfinity, 400 and 430 pounds in the rear of the car. So a little bit stiffer in the rear of the car, allowing the rear to help the car rotate just a little bit more through the corner. Because the trucks are slower than Cup and Xfinity, you can get by with a little bit more aggressive setup here without having to wear the tires quite as much. And then finally, the track bar is at 9 inches on both the left and the right hand side. Very different than what we just saw in Xfinity, more similar to what we saw in Cup. Gear settings, very similar to what we saw in Xfinity. That's going to do it for today. Thank you very much for joining me, and stay tuned as we will continue our support for NASCAR Heat 4.